Welcome all of you. Thank you for being here and allowing us to share some of the ideas for solutions, I think, for some of the problems that education is facing. It's one thing to think about what's going wrong with education. I think we really need to do that, but I think it's even more important that we really put our energy and our thoughts and our capacity for doing things where those problems are. Let me introduce to you briefly what School of the 21st Century is. It's not a school. It's not a school. It's a model for a school, and actually more and more stakeholders are participating in this. And it's different all over the world, and it's actually also very similar all over the world. We call it School of the 21st Century, first of all, to make sort of a break with what was going on in education in the 20th century. The challenges that we are facing today are not those of the 20th century. And so we really need to make sure that whenever we look for solutions, those solutions are not solutions to old problems. Although, as I will indicate, some of the problems that we are dealing with are really old problems, very old problems, and are also very universal problems. It's also called School of the 21st Century because it's not the school of forever. What we are not pretending is that we can come up with solutions that will sort of create the ultimate perfect setting for education, for all of humanity, for the rest of whatever. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at the situation today. And one of the things we realize, and that we are really keenly aware of, is that when we look at education, education is something, is a problem, is a situation, is a challenge that belongs to all of us. It's not just a problem of teachers. It's not just a problem of governments. It's not just a problem of parents. It's actually a problem of, or a sort of a challenge for all of us. And all of us at the same time. One of the things that we are really focusing upon is that when you address a single layer of the complexity of education as a system, you will never, and that's sort of a strong statement, I realize, but you will never come to integrated solutions. So yes, I'm very happy with what the previous speaker presented to us, providing us with sort of a technical infrastructure that will allow us to carry information, that will allow us to carry education. But it's not the carrier by itself that will transform education, even though without that carrier, it might not happen. So it's really a very complex and sophisticated interaction between a number of components. And I think that's essentially what we are trying to do in School of the 21st Century. And actually here in Suriname today, we are here with a group of people. We are here with universities. We are here with the University of Brussels. We are here with ADEC University. We are here with people from Stanford University. We are also here with ICT people. Actually, the nerdy guys who sort of solve all our problems when we don't know how to solve them, who sort of never eat, never sleep, and actually rush in so that students don't see all of the messy stuff that went on, and they get this impression of living in this really nice virtual environment that's smooth and soft and everything. And that's not really like that. So you have these nerdy guys who made it look like that. We are here with people from adult education. Adult education is sort of important because adult education is actually increasingly becoming two things. It's becoming sort of a plan B for students who never made it through the normal system. We can call them dropouts, but sort of adult education as plan B. But it's also increasingly becoming an answer to the challenges that we are facing with the demographic shifts, where people have people actually live longer, and therefore have to sort of make sure that they go along educationally, that they get more training throughout their careers. We were here with people from primary schools. And I think it's sort of nice to travel with universities and primary school teachers together. It's really important that when, as universities, we look at the problems of education and come up with all these nice ideas and things we are going to measure and implement, etc., that we really don't do that sort of from our nice campuses thinking about it, reading some books, some articles, and then thinking, oh, this would be nice. I mean, it's really important that we go out there and actually talk to the people. Talk to the people who have to live education, basic education, every day. It's important that we talk to the children. It's so important that we talk to the adults in adult education. Because education of the 21st century will not be education of the 21st century if it does not fulfill certain needs that exist in individual people and at the level of societies and communities. That's really what education is about. It's not about an ideal concept of look at what we can do. It's more about these are the problems and look at how we can solve them, how we can address them. And I think we really need to keep that focus, that strong focus. And basically what we want to do is to make sure that we don't start from, let's say, what's possible with ICT. Actually, that part works fine. I mean, products are launched and people use them. Actually, what I like very much is that people abuse them. They always use them for other things than that they were designed for. And I think that's really great. Because that creates opportunities for education. That allows the creation of solutions where you use something for something it wasn't designed for, but use it to solve a specific need. And sometimes these things create their own needs. That's fine. So we will do a very general presentation, and then we will also look at a very specific ingredient, a very specific element that I think is a really innovative way of looking at ICT, not just from the perspective of look how sort of how strong and powerful gadgets we can create, but looking at where could ICT, with everything it can do, and yes, we will perhaps not push it to its limits, but let's look how it can really address some of the challenges. And that will be presented by Professor Munoz, who is connected to Seeds of Empowerment, which is a spin-off of Stanford University and one of our main partners in this sort of global, local approach to education. So actually what I've been talking about so far is, and I hope this thing will work, is this. Asking the question, what would be a very impolite word to put there, but what is wrong with education? And again, we really need to address that question. And I know we need to do two things at the same time. On the one hand, we should not bother too much about what's wrong. We should also, to some extent, we should just look forward and move there. But the problems we are facing are so strong that we also need to allow ourselves to look at them and analyze them and see what their structure is and see how they are connected and look for solutions that sort of address this question that you can ask before you go to bed after a long and tiresome day. Say, okay, what have I been doing? What have I been contributing today? What is wrong with education? Why doesn't it work? Why does I think it's a really important question. Why does all this money, effort, time, solutions, why doesn't it bring the outcome, the results that are sort of on a par with what we put in? I think that's a really important question, because we are really putting in enormous amounts of money and energy and time and critical thinking into education, and yet we continue to face these important challenges. I'm not going to go into detail. We got a little more time, but not enough to sort of analyze all of them. But so the challenges we are facing, and again, these are not just challenges in developing countries. I live and I work close to Antwerp, one of the most industrialized parts of the world. And let me tell you, while the specifics may be somewhat different, we do face those same problems. Exactly the same problems. So we should be really sort of careful not to see these as problems of developing countries, as problems that we have already solved in other parts of the world. We haven't. Actually, what's happening is that some of these problems perhaps took a little more time before they surfaced. But they're there now. They're
there, and we need to address it. Equal access to education, specific target groups, the cost of face-to-face education. I've talked to a few people about that, but I was in Denver a few months ago, and a colleague there told me about something that was on the table, namely to reduce the number of teaching hours per week, because the school districts could no longer face the rising cost of face-to-face education. So the whole problem was that if we need to reach more people, and that's my first line, equal access, the better we become at providing access to education, that means the more formal education, the more education we need to provide. And that means a rising cost of education. How are we going to deal with that? Demographic shifts, what I mentioned before, people live longer. There's a need not only for more education before people enter the labor force, but also throughout their professional careers, they need more teaching. Profiles and training of teachers. How are we going to deal with that? Do we find enough good teachers? How are we going to address the problem of teachers in primary schools? In a lot of countries, people who teach in primary schools get, first of all, paid less than teachers at higher levels. They get typically less training, less background than teachers, for example, at the level of secondary education. While on the other hand, they have to deal with the most diverse part of the schooling system, of the educational system. It's when children are at the level of primary education that they're all together, where the diversity in the group is largest. So that's something we need to talk about. And then we definitely need to talk about access to further education. How does that work? How employers come to us and say, well, you know, we're not so happy. There's too much, there's too much money going to education. Because, look, when we get them, they're not trained, they're not ready to start. And then you go talk to the universities and say, okay, well, we could perhaps do a better job. But you know, the way we get them in first year students, no. Really, talk to the people at the level of secondary education. Please. Make sure we get better students. And we'll get better output when you give us better input. And you go to the secondary education people and they, you know, primary education, yes, but you know, we can understand it because the teachers at the level of primary education, etc. That's my story of a few minutes ago. And you go talk to the primary education people and say, well, yes, but we are trying. We are really trying. We're tired. It's so challenging. But you know, parents are really not with us. They really think that we should solve all the problems, and wouldn't it be nice if at least they would take some responsibility for solving the problems? That's the overall picture. And that's, I think, that sort of points at the need for an integrated approach to education. I mean, you cannot just single out one layer or one aspect and then think you will solve all the problems of education. And then there's my bottom line. Students actually increasingly tell us that they really don't like what we're doing. They're not so happy with the way education is going. It's not so engaging, and while we have more education than ever before, we also have more dropouts than ever before. This is a first attempt to understand what is going on. This is sort of a timeline. It takes you back 30,000 years, and you say, okay, we lived to be 30. And let's move on through history, and okay, the Middle Ages, medieval period, 48, nice. Then it started to decline a little bit. Okay, you go back to 38 and to 40, and then all of a sudden, what do you see? Around 1850, in a period of about 100 years, you see that all of a sudden, life expectancy doubles, more than doubles. So that's sort of a period where a lot of things happened. Now, that's one observation. And actually, part of that jump over a 100, 150, 200 year period has to do with formal education. But if we go back the other way, like, okay, 30,000 years, and let's move back, okay, out of the backlot, we go all the way, we're at the Surinam River, we go back, let's say, anywhere between 200 and 500,000 years ago. That's where things really started to change on a biological level. That's when our brains started to shape, where we really became a verbal species, able to express ourselves. Our hemispheres started to become asymmetrical and things like that. That's when really, under evolutionary pressure, things started to change. And now what's really important to understand when we look at the problems that we are facing in formal education is that the brains that we use to do all that novel stuff, the brains that allow me to take this thing and just push a button and move to the next slide, and my phone and my laptop and my tablet and all that stuff, and the fiber network that we were explained about by the previous speaker, all of that are things we do with brains that are anywhere between 200,000 and 500,000 years old. There was no evolutionary pressure for reading and writing. And that means that we do all that reading and writing with a brain that was not designed for reading and writing. That also means that there is not sort of not in the same way as when you have a genetic structure for it, there is no formula that says read and write, and this is how you do it. And actually, when you look at reading and writing processes, you see that that throughout the human species there are, and even within small communities, there are different ways of processing reading and writing. Okay, what kind of education is sort of the natural setting for our brain? Well, first of all, it's community-based. Learning happens in a community. It's needs-based. You learn the things that you need because they sort of facilitate your life, your everyday life. So there's a direct connection between the things you learn and the things you need and the things that help you. It's open. The problem of equal access to education simply doesn't exist 100,000 years ago. It's open to everyone. It will be different for most people and for most people that are part of that process, but it's open to everyone. Compare that to our schools now, who have closed, who are within four walls and with gates that close, and sometimes with access control, and you don't get in if you cannot prove that you belong to that school, and things like that. There is, though, a cultural canon, a narrative, chants, things that sort of carries, that sort of connects the community together, a sort of shared knowledge, deeply shared knowledge. It may be wrong from a scientific point, but it's something that does connect a community. It's essentially intergenerational. It's intergenerational. And yes, people from similar ages learn from looking at what others do and mistakes others make, of course, but it's intergenerational. It's really sort of part of the community where all levels, all ages are involved in the learning process. There's a lot of trial and error. That's what we're good at. We learn from mistakes. And there's a lot of mimicry going on, and actually we are, to a large extent, hardwired to copy what we see, to look at what people do and copy it, empathize with them, understand what they are saying. That's a really important basis for learning. Without that, it would be very hard for us to learn from each other. And then came along formal education, and formal education really did great things. It came with science. It came with the potential to sort of focus in on specific aspects and really go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Not just wider, but deeper and deeper and deeper, and come to a good grasp of essential information. And it came with industry. It came with sort of the need for industrialized processes. I mean, the industrialized processes only are possible when you have a labor force that has sort of a sort of general basic knowledge where you don't have to retrain people every time, and where you don't have to start from an individual learning biography and then adapt it to specific need and potential. Industry doesn't work like that. At least it didn't work like that at the time when it sort of came about. So I see formal education as sort of a pocket knife, a Swiss pocket knife, with all kinds of specialized blades. You can use one to clip your fingernails, and you can use one to sort of polish them a little bit, and you can open one to open a beer can, and you have one that you can use to tighten screws, and you see it's all these different things, and that gives us a potential for specialization. But I think we made a mistake, and again, it's not us who made the mistake, it's not we sitting here today, but I think it's our responsibility to look at that mistake and at least try to understand what went wrong and try to solve it. I think one of at the core of the mistake is the fact that because of the success of formal education, we started to shift responsibility to formal education. Say, okay, since this is such a great tool, perhaps it should do this and that and that and that and that. To give you a very specific example, legislation in Flanders is currently looking at whether a driver's license should not be obtained through formal education, part of the school curriculum. Sounds good. I mean, when you isolate it like it, okay, sounds good. Perhaps we will be able to offer better driving instruction than when it happens sort of out in an informal world. But how much can we charge formal education with? How much can we bring to the classroom and just expect teachers and let's say and management of schools and classrooms, etc., to handle? We're overburdening formal education. And as a result of that, actually two things happened. First of all, the image I sort of depicted of shifting responsibilities. The employers tell the university, and the university tells secondary education, and secondary education tells primary education, because, okay, everybody tries to sort of get rid of the problem and say, okay, it's the other part of formal education that's where it went wrong. And we lost, and I think that's so important to understand that, we lost the traditional embeddedness of education in a society. Education became enclosed. And of course, when we think at open source and internet, etc., you start to see how ICT might become part of a solution to sort of opening up education again. So that's one of the ways that we are now trying to understand how ICT could help us to gain back some of the aspects of education, some of the crucial aspects of education that we have lost. And so I think beyond that, we will also need to really start investing again in informal and ubiquitous learning. Not just expect that it will happen, but we will need to sort of actively work towards that. What we propose is sort of an integrated approach. And actually what we say is we need to do three things. We need to strengthen formal education. And yes, that comes with money, that comes with resources, that comes with teacher training, that comes with training management of schools, that comes with all of that. But it also comes, and I really want to stress that, with unburdening formal education, reducing what we expect from it, putting more emphasis on the essentials, but taking away some of the unrealistic expectations that we have towards formal education. And then I think we need to do two things. First of all, we need to look at formal education from the point of view, from the perspective of all the new options and potentials and possibilities that are created by new ICT. We can push formal education further than today if we allow ICT to play a constructive role in that story. But so the third element that we want to stress in what we see as school of the 21st century is that we need to get back to some of these old elements. We need open learning embedded in society. And I think we need to look for almost physical implementation of that. And in Antwerp we have, I think, a really great example of an open learning center that's outside schools, but it's used by schools, it's used by parents who want to teach their children. It's used by companies in the region. It's used by, well, basically by everyone who is looking for a structured but nevertheless informal setting for learning. But it's also used, for example, to make sure that whenever people get or gain competences through informal learning, that somehow those are sort of recognized and fed back into formal education, and within that center we have a service of people who look at competences of people, assess them, and sort of certify them so that they get a real effect in society, which is very strongly based on being able to prove that you have certain qualifications. But then ICT. The obvious ingredients there are distance learning, self-directed learning, the internet, the availability of open resources, etc. But I think what we need to focus on in that interface between formal and informal learning is a number of things. New roles for teachers. And again, when you add the intergenerational aspect to teachers, to learning, and that really becomes a different context. We need to do capacity building of the learners themselves. I mean, it's nice to think about self-directed learning, but what we do know is that self-directed learning does not really come natural. It does for some people, definitely not for all. So that's something that we need to look in. It's not only how are we going to train our teachers to function in that context, it's also how are we going to teach our learners to function in that kind of a context. A greater role for ICT also means that teachers need more competences. And please, not competences that take 2 years to acquire. Because then, again, we're back to where we are now. So we really need a use of ICT that's really natural and intuitive. We should not expect all teachers to become professionals in creating digital content. But what we do need are teachers who are able to tweak what is around, to get stuff either from publishers, nicely polished stuff from a publisher, or from the internet, something that someone put up there. And then I think they should be able to tweak that, to change it a little bit. And that's what we do in this course. We sort of train them to create quick and dirty digital content. I do want to stress we need a systems approach. When we look at individual aspects of, and that's what universities tend to do. We identify part of a problem, study it, measure it, etc., come up with solutions, advise governments, advise school systems, and then we're a little bit surprised that, as I mentioned before, that the outcome doesn't match sort of all the efforts we put in. So I think what I've put here on the bottom of the slide is sort of the core of what I want to say there, is that the interaction among elements, among parts of a solution, is as important as the elements itself. And here I have a slide, I will not run you through it, of what I mean by such an integrated approach. This is a project we are setting up actually here with the government in Suriname about working with dropouts. But you see when you run through the slide that we involve primary teachers, we involve subject matter teachers, we involve training in using ICT, we involve training in STEM, we involve we involve teachers of primary education to professionalize them and to run them through sort of a modernized curriculum of secondary education, etc. And we invest not only in the teachers, we invest in the students, and we invest in the parents. Again, weakest group, a child of a dropout father or mother. Okay. So that's what I mean by an integrated approach. If you do something for the dropouts, then you can not only get that to work when you involve the whole system. So I think that's where we need to look for solutions. So, to wrap it up, School of the 21st Century, I think we are looking for powerful and competent school focusing on essentials, unburdened by everything that all the other stakeholders are trying to sort of get them involved with. Open learning centers, outside schools, open to everyone, owned by the community, combined with subsidiarity. Those open learning centers sort of adapt. It's a formula, but it's like a gel. It adapts to the local needs. ICT, powerful ICT, capacity and competence building of all stakeholders, all the way from the governments, universities, teacher training colleges, all the way down to the students and pupils themselves. Subsidiarity for diversity, it comes with the capacity building. I mean, people need to be able to reach decisions, to make decisions, to analyze and come up with solutions without having to refer to someone else. If we want to slow down the doing, then please make someone else responsible. That's how you will slow it down, for sure. Create a structure where you are empowered to do it yourself. Subsidiarity, and then global connectivity. The problems we are looking at are not, well, they are local in their specificity, but they are global in their essence. And so for further discussion, questions, collaboration, here you have my email address, or come and see me and I will give you my business card. Thank you.